Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root, where we dive deep into understanding and addressing root causes of chronic health issues so you can help and find healing inside and out, now and forever. Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice at Trifecta Collective. Welcome to the podcast. So today we are going to continue on with talking about grief part two. And as I have a few like little notes in front of me here. And as I was kind of going through this before I started recording here, I also think I'm gonna label this as grief part two and loneliness, because as I was coming up with this list, and I know I touched on a handful of these kind of at the end of grief part one, and I want to just dig a little bit deeper into a lot of these and how they can present, and maybe some tools and strategies that might work well for you, that maybe have worked for me and or have maybe worked well with clients that I've worked with as this comes up. And there was this other really big theme that was coming up, and that was loneliness. And this has actually been coming up for a lot of my longer term clients within the last month or two, is having their lives change and feeling this maybe new or different sense of loneliness or being alone. And I do think there's a difference in that, and I will get to that. And yeah, I thought these two really paired nicely together in talking about these concepts. So this probably won't be quite as heavy as the first one. And this really might hit home if you are on your healing journey, thinking about going on a healing journey, in the middle of doing some work. Maybe you've already passed through some of these. I think it's really valuable to talk about these, because almost always when I talk to clients and any of these things are coming up, there is this really big sense of loneliness because they don't know anyone else in their lives going through this, or who have gone through this. And I think sometimes these other forms of grief and loneliness that can come up in our lives are a little less obvious, and not necessarily, I don't think everyone will go through these. I think pretty much everyone, most people, will go through some sort of grief in their life, especially if someone passes away, and the likelihood of that happening at some point in your life is arguably pretty high. And these are also really big deals that we can go through, and that can be very challenging to navigate. And once again, especially if you don't have a really tight-knit community, which by the way is one of them, is it can feel incredibly lonely. You can feel weird and isolated, and like there's something wrong with you because you may not know anyone else going through this. And this is a big reason. If you're not familiar with our programs, we do one-on-one coaching for sure. A lot of our clients, I'd say, in our primary program that we work in helping clients heal on a more one-to-one level is our group coaching program. And group really should be a quotation marks, because it's not really group coaching. It's all individualized coaching and programming. However, the calls are in a group setting, and it's almost like office hours, where we have time slots throughout the week where our practitioners are available and people hop on the calls and go one person at a time. And you get to listen to other people's stories. And this is a big thing. I also have a microdosing group, if you're not familiar. And yeah, we talk about some microdosing, and most of it is around trauma healing. And that is a smaller group. It is a closer knit group, a little bit more interactive. And, these two kind of programs were really important to me as I was building out this business, because what I was seeing so consistently is that women, we need community. Not that men don't, because they do. And sometimes it's different for us, for sure. And the level of healing and conversation and depth and connection, oftentimes there's a different desire there. And I wanted to give the space where people could, do their own work, go at their own pace. It wasn't a one size fits all kind of thing. And at the same time, people get to hear what other people were dealing with, both in all directions. People's struggles, what successes. Like, hey, I am finally sleeping better. Like, my skin is clearing up. Like, I didn't even realize I was going to get my period this month, and it came, and it was totally fine. I had no symptoms for the first time in years. I got my period for the first time in years, or I've done it consistently for now 6 months after not having it consistently for years on end. And so I wanted people to be able to share, I wanted women to be able to share these experiences. And once again, just know that if any of this resonates with you today, all of these topics that I'm going to be speaking about, once again, know that you're not alone. You're not the only one. I've gone through the vast majority of these. I think the only one is going to be the last one that I talk about. And I maybe have a little bit of a different perspective that also may resonate with some other people, some other women, as you listen to this. And no, none of these are exclusively women specific. And I do think as women, we do tend to dive deeper into our own healing and can experience more of these things. So the first one I really want to talk about is family. And this is a tough one for a lot of people. I went through this in a very different type of way. Not that it was easier or harder, and it was just a little bit different in how I needed space from my family, specifically my mother, as I was going through my healing journey. And a lot of times what'll happen is if you start to go on your healing journey and no one else in your family has gotten there yet, if you're really lucky, like maybe one or two other people are kind of going through it a little bit or have started or started to read or dabble or listen or do any of these things. And sometimes we need space from family that we're born into. And I think there's multiple forms of family that I also am going to talk about here. And so, if we think about the family that we were born into, sometimes we go on these healing journeys and start making changes and making shifts and not people pleasing as much and setting some boundaries and just being a little bit firmer on some things or wanting to talk about deeper things, wanting to talk about things that happened growing up, patterns that are still repeating, cycles that are still repeating. A lot of times, if you are the initiator, you can absolutely be the black sheep. And that can be challenging in a lot of ways. And the first and foremost is you may want to help and rescue your whole family for doing the work that you're doing and for doing this healing work and becoming aware and enlightened. And yeah, just very aware of these things and starting to make these shifts. And your family may get mad at you. They may not understand. They may, I've seen this especially with a lot of people who grew up in very, very strong religious backgrounds. There may be some persecution of you're not following the Lord's word or God's plan or something along these lines. And by the way, and I know I've said this before, this has nothing to do with spirituality. This is really becoming aware of our own patterns. Yes, spirituality and or religion can be a part of that. I also don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. I actually think they overlap quite well. And I will likely have my fiance on the podcast at some point and talking more about this because he has been through quite the experiences from religious spirituality and combining those things. So but that can be a really big thing within your family. And it's like you love them so much. You want to see them heal. You want to have this really close and arguably deeper, more real, more intimate relationship with them. And they may not be in a place to be able to do that. And so family functions, talking to your family, being close to your family, that can shift and change, and that can feel like a tremendous loss. A lot of grieving, a lot of sadness, certainly many other emotions can come up with that. Anger, regret, a lot of back and forth of should I cut this person off? Should I not cut this person off? What kind of boundaries should I set? What does this really look like? Here's the relationship I want, and is that realistic? Is this is everyone that you want to be a part of this, is everyone on the same page, and is everyone capable and desiring to also have the same or similar types of relationships? And a lot of times it is not. And that can be very, very, very challenging. You can be the outcast, you can be yelled at, persecuted, said that you are in the wrong. By the way, I've heard all of these things both for myself and with clients. And the blame game is no joke. People can blame you for all of the things, even if you had nothing to do with them. And family can also be very triggering when you're going along your healing journey and you have started to make a lot of these changes, and it can really pull you back into some old patterns, bring up a lot of things. And once again, I do think there's a lot of value in that and being able to work through that. And how can you stay regulated? How can you come back to yourself through those periods of time? And that's a big thing. And also understanding, once again, and I feel like I've said this before, and I'm not totally sure on what episode, but when we set these boundaries, especially with our family, especially with people that we've known for a very, very long time, these boundaries are ours to uphold, not anyone else's. And we hope over time people learn our boundaries and what we expect out of these boundaries. And it is also not fair to set some new boundaries for someone to forget and or not remember, cross them, and for you to get mad. That is also not necessarily appropriate unless there was like very malintent that is well known, kind of going on there. So, but this can be very hard, and redefining and separating from your family can be very challenging. For me specifically, when I lost my uncle, that really felt like the last tie to my family. And certainly while I was grieving his death, it was also a real sadness and grieving process to realize that was my last big tie. And not that if I reached out to cousins or different people in my family, I'm sure they would be very open. And I still have some lines of communication open with certain, a handful of family members, and it's not the same. And I recognize that. And of course it could shift, it could change. And I don't know if that's in the cards for me, and that's okay. And once again, I went through a grieving process around that. It still comes up every once in a while. When my partner proposed, that absolutely came up for me, and it just looks really different. I think another piece, and this is similar and also a little bit different here, but for me, I think there's a lot of value in, and I think some of us may not realize how valuable this is until we don't have it, but recognizing how valuable it can sometimes be having known someone for so long and for them to be able to recognize your growth. And if someone grew up with you, they watched you as a child, they watched you grow into a teen, into an early adult, to a later adult, and then go through this healing process. Wow, that can be really powerful. And that, not that we need external validation, not that we need that. And there's a lot of power in that. My fiance and I were just talking about this yesterday, and he's been working with a therapist for many, many years, and to see him propose to me, and this was the first time he had talked to him since he had proposed. And my fiance kept that very close to his heart, the fact that he was going to propose and the timing of everything. And that stirred up some things in and of itself. And to talk to his therapist, and this person that he's been very close with and who has seen him go from, right after his first head injury to progressing through his life and all of the healing and changes and everything that's been done. He's like, wow, it's really cool to be able to hear that kind of feedback, to just be able to hear the growth and see that. And for me last year, I got that quite a bit from two of my mentors that I started working with early on in my psychedelic work. And so they've known me for several years. They've seen me go through some pretty big changes and pretty big transformations. And for me last November, when I saw them both, for them separately, and privately to approach me and say something about it, it really struck a chord with me. And it also, that is something that I was aware of, that when I lost my uncle, and he made a lot of changes after my mom passed, with his own habits and thinking and his own healing journey. And we talked a lot about that because we were on kind of different and similar paths. And to be able to recognize how much we were growing, and to be able to reflect back to each other what that really looked like, what that felt like, and to be able to see that in each other, and share some of the same struggles and wins and different things like that, was really, really powerful. And to lose that, once again, like, that was another piece of grieving that I had. And that still comes up for me sometimes, where this, once again, it's not like I need someone to validate or say, like, good job or yay for you, because I don't need that, and I don't feel like I need that. And being able to have someone who's seen me as a child, to be able to see me in the heart of my own trauma, and drinking to numb and repeat a lot of these same patterns that I learned from my mother that were not good, not healthy, and to be able to really make some significant shifts, significant changes, to break some very significant family trauma cycles myself. That was a big deal. And that did really make a difference for me, and felt really good to have that. And so I think there can be a grieving process that comes along with that. One, if you don't have anyone like that. Two, if you lose that person and or people in your lives. And there's one client in particular that I have that I've been working with now for, I think we started in 2020. I think it was early on, and it may have been a little bit earlier than that. I can't quite remember exactly when, but it's been at least 5 years since we started working together. And for me, I talk to her about this all the time. And just seeing, and I've worked with her also in a variety of capacities because I was doing more personal training work at the time. I've done, yeah, just done a lot of different type of work with her in a lot of different capacities. And, I remember when we first started working together, she was so dissociated from her body. And I would ask her, hey, when we do this, like, what are you feeling? What do you feel it in this area? What do you feel? What sensation is it? And she was so disconnected from her body that we had to have a conversation, be like, she's like, I cannot answer these questions. And this is something I'm not capable of being able to share with you. And I need you. And it's frustrating for me if you keep asking these questions the same way. And so we had to figure out a different way to communicate and talk through these things so I could get some feedback in a way that I needed to be able to do my job and be able to support her, and also in a way that felt good for her as well. And for now, when if I ask, what does your belly feel like? What do you feel any sensations? This, and she is able to close her eyes, tune in, and tell me immediately. And man, it is such a testament into all of the work that she's done. I could not be prouder of her. And I've played, in my opinion, a very, 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 very small piece in her overall healing process. And just, I mean, it's incredible to be working with someone over the course of 5 years, and to see that level of progression. Even clients I've worked with for a few months, a year, a couple years. I mean, it is really incredible to see the progress that can be made. And it can be very challenging to recognize that yourself at times. And so having someone who is able to reflect back to you, hey, do you remember when we first started working together? And this was what we would have never been able to have this conversation. This conversation would have looked totally different. Remember what you said to me when I tried to bring this stuff up? And look at where we are now. And having someone like that in your life, once again, I do think it just provides a lot of value and can be very helpful in providing reassurance that you are growing and shifting and changing and doing all of these things. Once again, not that we need that. And it can be hard if we lose that kind of person. So that is another type of grief that can absolutely come into play here. And, one of the biggest suggestions I can give you is have some different tools, have some different resources. Community can go a long way. Family is not always the family we are born into. We can create our own family, and that's going to lead me into kind of my next couple topics here. And sometimes we really need to take a hard look at what kind of relationship we want and or we are able to have with our family. And that may not look exactly how we'd like. And that may be the reality of the situation. And once again, spending time with yourself and taking that time to grieve, I do find letter writing to be extremely valuable in this case. That's just for you. You can burn it, you can bury it, you can put it in some water. You can just keep it for yourself. I still have my mom's eulogy on my computer, and it just stays in a folder kind of by itself away. I don't see it very often. Every once in a while I might think about it and pull it out. And that's just where I keep it, and that's what feels good for me. So the next one is losing friendships and or changing friendships. Oftentimes this can be recognizing that people who you thought were your friends maybe aren't as good of friends as you would really hope. And once again, I think we all need friends. I think we all need community. There are lots of studies that show that we need that. And there's also some really interesting studies showing the changes that can happen in inflammation levels, that can change with cortisol levels, that can change with some other different types of hormones and markers when women are in community. And I just had this conversation this week with another one of my clients about this. And sometimes you recognize as you start to go through your own healing journey, how other people make you feel. And this can go both ways. Some people can make you feel really good. You just leave interactions with people and you're like, I feel so good. Every time I'm with this person and I leave them and I feel lighter. I feel good. It was so that even just like the 30 minutes of coffee with this person was just like very therapeutic and very helpful and really great. And that's amazing. And that's really how friendships should make you feel. Not that friendships are all sunshine and butterflies all the time, because no, they aren't. And they should feel supportive. They should make you feeling good most of the time. And if people make you leave feeling bad, like you can't be your true self, that you can't speak up without being persecuted. Now, obviously, we're speaking in a way that's not attacking or insulting or, any of these things. So we are communicating in a way that is supportive and healing and true to ourselves as well. And we should be able to call people out in a positive way when needed. And ideally, they would be receptive to that. And I think, for me, I know this was a huge thing for me, and I'm not totally sure where I got this from. I'm sure I got this from my mother, and not totally sure 100% because she did have some female friends, like long-term female friends, and there was this always like search and hunt for male attention and affection and things like that. But for me, I know growing up, I feel like there was a lot of competition between women, competition for guys growing up, and disputes over having crushes on the same boys, or competition within workplaces, and almost thinking like it's a zero sum game, and we've got to like tear each other down for one of us to get up, and it was a whole thing. And the friendships that I have, the female friendships that I have now, these women could not be more supportive across the board. And some of us are in similar workplaces and industries. And I have never, ever felt in competition with any of them. I've never not wanted to talk about work because I thought they would steal an idea, or I was going to steal their idea, or there was no sort of competition. And for me, that's a big shift. And I remember when I first started in some mastermind groups and different kinds of like group business kind of coaching, that I did still continue to feel that I really felt like we were in competition with each other, which is not the case. And for me, I really don't feel that way anymore. And it's, the more people that are in the health and wellness industry, not that I agree with all of them, and people need help. We, as a society, especially as women, we are struggling. And I may not resonate with everyone. Someone else may not resonate with everyone, and so there's different people for different things. And I know for me personally, I've worked with a lot of different types of people, and I go back to them for different things and for different reasons and different tools and different times in my life when I'm feeling needs or different types of support. And I know these people because I've worked with so many different types of people, what kind of support they're able to provide and what feels very nurturing, what feels very healing, and what feels very supportive and can help me fill my cup up at that time. So I think that is really valuable to have and being able to have a different varieties of people that you've worked with, and maybe that's not a possibility for you, which is also totally fine. And still, we should be able to have these kinds of relationships that feel really good, that feel really deep, where we can be true and honest. And my largely my friends and I, of course, we talk about some lighter topics, and I would say most of our conversations revolve around deeper healing topics of what are we working through right now, like what are we really struggling with, what is going really well, how are we feeling, where are we feeling neglected, lonely, sad, happy, joyful, all of these things in different areas of our lives. And it's only supportive. And certainly there's some advice at times, and a lot of it is just, I am here for you. I'm here to listen. I love you. And if there's something specific I can do for you, please let me know. And it's amazing. It is really amazing. And I credit a lot of my shift of female friendship to two of the women that I've worked with in the psychedelic space largely, and done many journeys with them, and they were leading these retreats and these holding the spaces for these retreats, and seeing their friendship and how deep of a friendship they really had, how they interacted with each other, how they spoke to each other, what that really looked like. Mind blowing, really mind blowing to me. And I didn't know friendships could look and feel like that. And that was a big shift for me. And I know for many women in my circle, they have been major role models for a lot of us in what female friendships can really look like and feel like, and how supportive they really can be. And it's so beautiful. It's so healing. It's so nurturing. And I cherish the time that I have anytime I get to see these women. And obviously it's not that often anymore because I've moved away from where most of them are living at this point. And it's beautiful when I get to talk with them and share with them, and they can share with me, and all of those things. And it took time and it took effort, and it wasn't easy to necessarily find these people. And this is a really common struggle for a lot of women as they go through their healing journey. And usually the best piece of advice I can give someone is, think about, now that you're in this healing space, going through your own healing journey, what do you find appealing? What do you find going to yoga classes, cacao ceremonies, new moon ceremonies, dog parks, walks outside, a fitness class, a certain type of gym, certain type of grocery store, like where workshops, classes, book clubs, where might these other women who might resonate with you, where might they be? What might they be doing? And how can you go maybe find them and connect with them? And this can be a real struggle too. And there can be, you can have so much excitement and be like, oh my gosh, I think I found one. I think I found a friend who I can deeply connect with and heal with and do all of these things with. And I'm so excited. And then something shifts, something changes. And you can get really sad, and there can be a huge grieving process when it comes to that. And And it can be very frustrating. It can be very lonely, very isolating as you're searching for these individuals. And once again, we're not alone. Most of us go through this at some point in our healing journey. And your people are out there. And it's just a matter of continuing to do your own work, continuing to set your own boundaries around relationships that you already have. And that might mean losing some friends too, which there can also be a grieving process absolutely for that. A lot of loneliness coming up with that too, as you start to maybe distance yourself from previous friendships that maybe you realize are maybe weren't the best of friends, or maybe not the best people to be around in where you are in your stage of life. And yeah, and finding these other people. But I promise you, they are out there, and they are there. It's just a matter of where are they and how can we find different ways to connect with them. Similarly, and I know I've chatted about this before and shared some of my own preconceived notions, we'll say, about this, but sometimes as we start to go through our healing journey, especially as women, especially because oftentimes we go through our healing journeys sooner or faster or more in depth than our potentially male significant others, if that's who you are with. That can be a real struggle, and it doesn't have to be certainly just be male. And I do see this more commonly between men and women, in the females initiating and leading this more. And I also spend a lot of time in female-driven healing spaces, and this is a very common topic to come up with women who are with men. In that, sometimes our relationships need to change, and you know we need something different. And I know for me in my previous marriage, it got to a point where I was very aware that this was happening very early on, that as I was going through my healing journey and I was shifting and changing, and my significant other at that time wasn't, and maybe wasn't as open to it. While he was very supportive of me doing all of the work that I needed to do, he was not quite along for his own right at that point in time. And I was aware of it, and I was afraid that at some point it would lead to a separation. And obviously it did. We are no longer together. We did get divorced, and that played a big role. And I don't know any female who has left their male significant other who hasn't tried their darndest with the capabilities that they had to help bring the partner along. And sometimes we don't always have our own tools and resources. And I know in my case, I was so burnt out and so depleted, and I had tried multiple different things and really hoped it was going to work out, and I thought I had more time, and I didn't. And it may have seemed sudden, potentially in his eyes, potentially in external eyes, and it was absolutely not. This was something that had been going on for quite some time, for several years, and it just got to a point where I had to make a decision, where it was either I was going to stop and or very significantly stall my own healing journey and physically feel the consequences. And I was actively feeling those physical consequences, by the way, or make the tougher decision, go through a shorter question mark, go through this harder period of time, leave, and really make some significant changes in my life and feel a difference. And that's what I chose. For me, it was a matter of which hard was I going to choose: short-term hard and or long-term hard. And for me, I chose short-term hard. Now, long-term obviously led to, me finding my current partner, current fiance, and living a totally different life and feeling so supported, so loved, and so regulated in ways that I have never felt. And my situation is obviously a little bit different. I did not go out and date at all. At all. I did not date at all. When we started together, we already knew each other. We already were friends, and we had already had many, many, many deep conversations of if we are going to enter into a relationship, one, it's going to be serious right off the bat. Two, this is really what we're both looking for and what we're really capable of at this moment. And recognizing that and being like, hey, let's give it a shot. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, like, that's okay too. And both being really on the same page with that. And so, yeah, when we got together, it was serious right right away, which is obviously a little bit different than where most people land. But changes in significant others is a big one. And this is not to say that I think everyone needs to get divorced or should get divorced and or change the relationships. And a lot of times we do need to make some changes, and maybe this means to just we communicate differently with our partners and be able to share with them, hey, this is really how I'm feeling. I'm feeling really burnt out. This is where I could use some support. I know I haven't done the best of job previously asking for support and asking for help in these different areas, and I really am needing this at this time. And the right partner will absolutely step up, and they may not know. It may take them a little bit of time, which I think is totally fine. Let's be patient. Just because we've spent a lot of time of our own time working through and making these shifts doesn't mean someone else is ready right off the bat. And there needs to be some effort that goes into it too. And I think that can go a long way. And the relationships that I do see really change and evolve and blossom as especially one person starts their own healing journey, and ideally at some point someone's kind of can come along for the ride and hopefully also do their own healing work, is the ability of both people being very open and receptive and willing. And really it's just the willingness. It goes a really long way. And not that any relationship is perfect, not that my relationship is perfect, not that I don't know if there's any quote unquote perfect relationship. And man, an open relationship where you can feel safe to share your emotions, to share your struggles. Wow, is that something else? And for me, being in this kind of relationship now, when I've never been in that kind of relationship, it's a game changer in life. And I only wish that everyone else gets to experience that. And some relationships, once again, can really kind of grow and develop and shift and change, and that's amazing. And others don't. And sometimes we have to make those tough decisions to leave, to make a very big change. And obviously there can be a very big grieving process that comes along with that in a variety of ways, of not only just potentially being by yourself, losing someone that you've known for potentially many, many, many years, someone that you thought you were going to have this whole life with and build this whole life with, and now that's not the case. And yeah, there can be a lot of grief that really comes along with that. I think another kind of like offshoot of this is, what did you think your life was going to look like and be like? And I know for a lot of women, once again, in particular, sometimes this involves having a family, not being able to have a family, not wanting a family, being forced to have a family, and it can kind of go both ways. And let alone the struggles of getting pregnant and carrying a child full term that so many women struggle with. And I mean, really, this has been eye-opening for me just over the last probably 7 or 8 years, the number of miscarriages that women really have. I mean, I've known women and worked with women who have had anywhere between 2 to 8 miscarriages, and sometimes they had 0 children out of that, which can be devastating and provide so much grief really around all of this. And of course, there are other avenues to have children, and that can be an option for some people. For some people, that's not really what they want, and for others, maybe it's not totally financially feasible or very possible, and that can bring around a lot of grief as well around this. I know for me, I'm a little bit on the other end of the spectrum where I've never really wanted children, and I've never been pregnant before, and I mean, I have full faith in my body that if I really wanted to, I could. And we never know until we really try. And I've done so much work that I feel pretty confident in it. And I know plenty of women who have not wanted children and have accidentally gotten pregnant. And there's a level of grief around that. And that some of these women are the most incredible mothers that I've seen. And there's a grief that comes along with this of a life that maybe they really wanted, or things that they had to give up, shifts that they had to make. And once again, not that they didn't do it or weren't willing to do it, not that they aren't great parents, and they had to make a lot of sacrifices, and that can absolutely bring around a lot of grief. And once again, there can be jealousy if you were on the other end and you really wanted a family, wanted children, and maybe that ended up not being in the cards for you, and you have friends who are pregnant, who do get pregnant, and who do have families, and there can be jealousy and a lot of grief that comes around with that too. I know for me during my last November, during my journey, sorry, 2 years ago, in my journey, I believe, yeah, it was the 2 years ago. So about 2.5 years ago now, for me, this really came up for me. And, I was 30, probably 33, 34, 33, 34 at the time. And during my journey, I felt my body grieving the fact that my heart did not want a child. And my body was going through this grieving process of, let's be honest, as women, we are biologically designed to be able to have children. Technically, we have our periods, we've got ovaries, we've got eggs, we have all of these things, and our bodies were technically built to be able to get pregnant and grow a child, give birth to that child. And of course, there are many things complications that can surround all of that. And yeah, I felt my body grieving, and it was a really deep grief and sadness that my body was going through. And in my heart, I knew it wasn't the right decision for me. And my fiance and I have had so many conversations about this of, yeah, at some point I might change my mind. I might be open and not totally sure. Let's not bank on that. And I'm open to a conversation later on. And I do still have some time in my eyes where I could get pregnant if that is something that we really wanted to do. And recognizing that that is not super on the forefront of my mind and super on the table. And there can be grieving there, especially, we also could be in the situation of where one partner wants a family, the other partner doesn't. Or we've changed our mind and maybe one partner did want a family and was thinking about it, was okay with it, and they changed their mind. It was, I really don't, or I really do. And that can bring about a lot of grief and sadness. And so learning how to sit with all of this, and I think society can put a lot of pressures on us, especially as women. And I know for me, before my healing journey, before I set a lot of boundaries around this, I would get a lot of comments of, oh, especially when I got engaged the first time and got married. When are the kids coming? What is that going to look like? Time frame? How many do you want? And it was, no, that's not really on the table for us. Well, we've had that conversation, and that is not something we're super interested in. And getting a lot of questions, feeling pressure, external pressure from society, from family, from different people to or not to. I think it can go both ways. I feel like most of society is pushing, oh, you should have a family, you should have kids. Like, you'll never experience love that way. And there's so many things that can open up. And while I totally agree with that, and I think we can also live very fulfilling, love-filled lives without children. And it's totally your choice. And it is totally your call. And it is a really, really big decision that I think should not be made lightly in any direction. So really thinking about that. And yeah, there can be some grieving that happens in all directions, no matter kind of where you land or where you stand on this. Recognizing that your life may not turn out exactly as you thought and/or hoped, that can be really devastating, especially because there is a clock. for women. We have a certain period of time where we can get pregnant, and with all of the hormonal struggles that are going on in our society right now, it can be very challenging for many people to get pregnant. And it's been really incredible as a practitioner to support people in balancing their hormones about getting their body ready to get pregnant. And sometimes we'll see them through miscarriages, and to be able to see them actually get pregnant and then be able to carry full term and then have a very healthy baby is really incredible. I'll tell you that it's very, very, very incredible, and we've seen it so many times. We've had a lot of women come to us with a lot of struggles to get pregnant and or with miscarriages, and yeah, it brings me so much joy to to be able to see these women get pregnant and be able to carry full term and then be able to see their lives with their children that they really wanted. I mean, that's really what they were desiring and really wanting to have in their lives, and that's incredible. And there can be a lot of grief that comes along with that too, and the struggles and trials and tribulations that can all come along with that. So, once again, know that you are not alone. And I also think the other last little piece of this that I want to talk about too is, you know, once again, like for me, I don't really want to have children, and most women my age already have them and or are getting ready to have them. And I think for me, having a lot of friendships with older women, women who are in their late 40s, early 50s and up, has been really helpful. And most of them do have kids. Some of them don't. Most of them do though. And to be able to relate to them in different ways and be able to see their struggles, their healing, all of the things that can come along with children, and also also to be able to see some lives without children and how fulfilling those are. That's been really helpful. And to also be able to have relationships with these women that, I think it can be very hard as, when you do get pregnant, especially if you have a tougher pregnancy, giving birth, then you have a new baby, and then your body's not yours for a while if you're breastfeeding, and just you have a new baby that requires a lot of time and attention. And friendships can fall away, can look different, there can be some separation, especially if, some people are having children, maybe one or two people aren't having children, or that's not super on the table for them. That can be really challenging, and being able to and having to look at those relationships and challenges and struggles and work through that. And once again, my invitation would be sit with all of those feelings, feel the feelings, and searching for community in people that are maybe in similar places, or maybe have similar ideals, or maybe that you're in similar places, and that doesn't mean you guys are the same age, by the way. That can be really valuable and bring a lot of healing, bring a lot of comfort, bring a lot of connection to our lives. And being able to share those feelings very openly with people that are safe, especially other women who feel safe for you, that can go a really, really long way. And so, once again, these people are out there, I promise. And be patient in finding your tribe, your people, your community, your person that you feel very connected with. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. I had a few other things on my list, and I think I'll save it for another podcast episode. So thank you so much for joining, for listening. As always, please like, subscribe, follow. If it resonates, a 5-star review really, really, really means the world to us. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.